Hi, in this video I'm going to walk through how to install and use the Geographical Information System software QGIS. Now, this is a very useful package for plotting geographical information. It's open source and it's free to use. The only downside to this particular software package is that the learning curve is a little bit steep and it's not particularly intuitive. Now, fortunately, there are a lot of materials online that will help you learn how to use this, and I hope this video will be useful. For those of you who are interested in learning more beyond this video about how to use QGIS, I highly recommend this website, QGIStutorials.com. It contains instructions for doing most of the things you might want to do with any GIS software. So let's take a look at QGIS. If you go to QGIS.org, you'll find all of the information you need to install it. I'm on a Windows computer right now, so I'm going to go ahead and install it for my computer. But if you're on a Mac or a Linux machine, QGIS also works with those platforms. Fortunately, the current version of QGIS is actually pretty easy to install on a Mac. Installing it used to be fairly complex, but it's been simplified pretty significantly. To get started, all we need to do is download the installer. This is a pretty big piece of software, so it might take a little while for you to install it, and it will require a little bit of disk space. I'm going to go ahead and install the QGIS standalone installer version 3.12, the 64-bit version. Now, most computers these days will require the 64-bit version, so you should install that. So once it's downloaded, you simply open the installer and follow the instructions. You can see that this requires 1.9 gigabytes of space, so just be aware of that. And it'll take a few minutes to install. Okay, so once it's finished, just go ahead and close the wizard, and then you can start the program. Now, in order to actually plot any data or make any maps, we need a map onto which to plot our information. Now, of course, with QGIS, you can create a map from scratch, but I'm going to take advantage of some of the many shapefiles that exist on the internet. And in particular, I'm going to show you how to use maps from the China Historical Gazetteer project. You can find this data on Harvard's website at this particular link. Now, what I want to do is I want to actually get some of these base maps to start working with. Now, I encourage you to explore this site because there's a lot of really valuable information here, but I'm going to go ahead and just grab some of these maps. To do this, I'm going to go into Data, I'm going to click on QGIS, and then I'm going to grab QGIS version 6, and I'll go ahead and I'll get the time series data. These are map layers from different periods in Chinese history. You can see here what I want is this V6 time series prefecture polygons, which are spatial coverage, as you can see, for the dynastic administration units from 1350 to 1911, and prefectural information from earlier periods. But of course, there still is gaps in spatial coverage. So here I'll just click on this, and I will have to agree to a data use agreement. I'm going to go ahead and grab the ones with the UTF encoding with the WGS84 projection. Now, I can change the projection later if I want. So I'll download this, and I'll accept this, and I'll go ahead and open this. And you can see that this includes a number of different files. It has the shape files, which is what I'm interested in for the base maps, and it has a README and some various other information, and I really encourage you to take a look at this. If you take a look at the README, it will tell you a lot about how to cite the data set and information about how it was created. So once I've downloaded this, I want to go ahead and extract all of this information just to my desktop. And here I'll just set this to, rather than downloads, I'll put it at desktop. You can of course browse to wherever you might want to put it. It doesn't matter so much. So I'll extract this. And now we can see that I have this folder of information on my desktop, okay? And so now that that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and open up QGIS, and it will start loading. So after you start the program, you might be greeted with a splash screen, you might not. It might depend on the version you're using. it'll actually tell you if there's another version of QGIS available. So I'm here in an untitled project, and you can see that I have a lot of options available to me in terms of what I might want to do. One of the really great things about QGIS are the plugins. There are many, many plugins that users have created that help you do almost anything you could imagine. And because a lot of this is done in Python, you can write them yourself if you have any familiarity with that. The disadvantage, of course, is that this is a complex piece of software. It can also be a little bit unstable sometimes, although in the newer versions I've found that they tend to be a little bit more stable. So that being said, I'm going to walk through the steps of creating a basic map using that map that I just downloaded. I'll go to Layer, I'll go to Add Layer, and I want to do this not Create Layer, because Add Layer will let me add a shapefile. Create Layer lets me create one. So I'll add a layer. And here's where I go ahead and I load my map into QGIS. Now, a vector layer is a mathematically described polygon, and this is generally what you'll want to use when you want to create a data visualization, because it allows for a lot more customization. Now, if you have a scanned file, like an image of a map, that's a raster file, and you can use those, but for the moment, I'm just going to show you how to work with vector files. So once I have created add a vector layer, to pick it, what I want to do is I'll click this ... button, and this will bring up my file explorer. And here I'm going to select that folder that I extracted, and then I'll select this shapefile. If I click open and then add, it will add this layer to my QGIS. Now, it doesn't automatically close this, but if I go here, we can actually see now I have all this information. So once I've added this map to my QGIS project, I can start playing around with it. Now there are lots of different things I can do, but to get started, if I right-click or control-click with a Mac, I can look at the different attributes for this particular data set. So if I open this attribute table, I'll get a bunch of information about the names, the places, the type of geographical unit it is. So anything that the creators of this particular data set have included, that's here in this data set. So I can look at the beginning years, I can look at when a particular jurisdiction became defunct, all sorts of things like this. And I can rearrange this data based on clicking these column names just pretty easily. Now, if I want to edit this, there are a few ways I can approach it, but often what I'll want to do is I'll want to click on Properties here. And so once I get into Properties, I can start playing around with this. So let's imagine that I want to create a map of China as it was in the year 600 according to this data set. Well, I can do that because all of these different jurisdictions have years associated with them, so I can filter them. So to do this, if I click on Source, I'm going to go into my query builder. So here I can use syntax that's pretty similar to SQL to filter my map. So to make sure I'm mapping all of the jurisdictions that existed in the year 600, I need to take my beginning year. If I double click it, it will add it down to this dialog box down at the bottom. And of course, the beginning year has to be less than or equal to 600, just like this. And I need to make sure that the end year is greater than or equal to 600. Okay? And I can click this test button to tell me what is this going to return. And here, this is going to return 78 rows. So 78 jurisdictions in this map existed in the year 600. So I'll click OK, and then I'll click OK here. And then if I hit Apply, and then I close out of this Properties box, now we can see that this is what the map's jurisdictions look like. So this is a slice in time in the year 600. So I can go ahead and look at this attributes table again. So taking a look at this, I can see that I have the 78 rows that existed during the year 600, and maybe I want to change this map a little bit to display some of the information that's contained in this attribute table. So what if I color the different jurisdictions based on the year in which they were established? So this would tell us in the year 600, which of these is the oldest. Maybe that's something we're interested in. So to do this, I'll go back over here on my layer and I'll go back into properties. And now, instead of going to source, what I want to do is I want to click on Symbology. And here you can see that I have fill. It has this kind of brownish color. I can change this. Let's say I do want to color this based on the age of the jurisdiction. To change this, up here at the top, I have single symbol. That means everything in my map is going to be the same color. So what if I change this to a bluish color? Because I like blue a lot more than I like this brown color. If I click OK, it'll just change everything to blue. I should say, if you're making a map, don't make things blue unless they're water. It throws people off. So I'll go back into properties. And if we want to change this based on population, if I click on the top here, and instead of using single symbol, I use graduated. This will let me establish a color ramp based on whatever my values in a particular column are. So here I can click on column, and I'm going to select beginning year. And once I've done that, I need to click classify. And then it will create a legend from white to dark red based on the age of the jurisdiction. Now, if I want, I can actually flip this to make the older ones darker. To do this, I'll simply click on this arrow here and then invert color ramp. If I classify this again, it'll go ahead and do its thing. And if I click apply and then OK, now we can see the darker regions are the oldest ones. So that's how you change the color of your map based on data that's in this attribute table. Now, how do you get data into this attribute table if it doesn't already exist there? Well, that's an important question, right? So if I right-click on this and I go back into my attributes table, there are lots of ways to do this. I can click on this pencil button to toggle editing mode. And so this will actually let me change any of this data should I want to. But I can also add information. If I want to add a new field that is another column, I can click on this button here, and then it will open this dialog box that's add a field. And perhaps this is population. I can add a comment here if I want to. It's an integer. And I can tell it how long this integer is going to be, and maybe I'll say it can be as long as 10 digits. And I'll click OK. And when it does that, it has null values. So to add information, I simply can click on this and type it in. Now, it won't let me go beyond a 10-digit number because that's what I told it. But let's say this is 234, 10, and 10, and so on. And so once I add this information, I can actually use that to color my map. Now, of course, in many cases, you don't want to be adding data one point at a time because that takes a really long time. So I can actually add data to this attribute table from a spreadsheet, although the process is slightly complicated. So let's imagine I have a spreadsheet that has population data for all of these jurisdictions. Well, I've just created a dummy data set that contains random population values for all 78 of these jurisdictions. I've saved it to a file that I've just called population, and if I open this, you can see that it contains the system ID of the location from this QGIS project, which you can see right here in system ID. And I've just generated random values for this population column. And so that looks like this. Now, I should point out that if you want to tell QGIS what kind of data is in each of these columns, it will normally try to treat this as a string. So you actually need an additional file that is a CSVT file that just says these are both integers. So this is an integer and an integer. Okay, it's a little bit strange, but that is how it is. So now I want to import that data from the spreadsheet. To do this, I need to add it as a layer in my project. So I'll go into Layer, and then I'll go into Add Delimited Text Layer. And here, I'll simply browse to find the file. So I'll click this ... And on my desktop, I want to choose Population. I'll click OK. And then we can see that it will load it in. Now, in order to actually import this, I need to go into Geometry Definition and select No Geometry. That tells it that I'm not actually importing coordinates, I'm actually just importing attributes. So, I'll click Add, and now I can close this, and we can see that I have an attribute table that is just population. And I can right-click this and open the attribute table, and we can see that I have system ID and population. To add this data to my map, I'm going to click on this. I could right-click to get back to properties. I can also double-click it, and that'll open this up. And now what I want to do is I want to go into Joins and click plus. So I can select my join layer, which is population. The join field is system ID, and the target field will also be system ID. This just tells it these are the two columns that contain the same information, that is, unique identifiers for each of these jurisdictions. If I click OK and apply, now my attribute table should contain this information. So if I close this and I go back to this attribute table and I check, you can see I have population underscore population. It still has that column that I was messing around with earlier. So I can go ahead and delete this, and I will delete this. Okay. I want to make sure I turn off the editing here. I'll save this. If you've selected all of the items in your attribute table by clicking either this button, or if you've selected one or another, what you might have noticed is when you go back in to view your map, they'll all be yellow, indicating that you selected them. If you want to deselect them, there is a button right here that says Deselect All. If I click that, it will unselect it, and now we can see our previous visualization. And then go ahead and close your attribute table. So now that you have that population data added, what you can do is you can simply double-click this. Then in Symbology, we want to keep graduated, but now we want to change the column to our population. We'll change the color ramp maybe to blue. Let's do greens, because again, blues are better for water. I'll click Classify to recategorize all of the information, and then Apply. And then if I click OK, now we have a map that contains a choropleth of population information. Of course, this is random data that I just generated, so this is not a real map. So this should show you how to quickly add in a shapefile and how to plot a little bit of data onto that. So happy map making. I hope this is useful, and be sure to check out QGIStutorials.com, because that contains tutorials to do all of this and much, much more. Okay? Well, good luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.